So here at the Bharat Mobility Global Expo, I'm joined by two very special guests. I have with me Mr. Sai Sridhar and Mr. Satish Sundaresan from Elektrobit India. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out and talking to Autocar Professional. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
I love talking SDVs with you guys, and I think I'll just begin from there itself. Satish, if I may ask your perspective, if you could just outline it broadly for us. Where do we see the industry going in terms of these broader SDV trends that we are going to eventually see unfold in the future.
So just to define SDV again, so it's the possibility for us to change the functionality of the vehicle with software.
Right.
So we are at a point where from purely a mechanical hardware based architecture system, we are now moving to software around the hardware. So that's the phase, at least, that I call it. And then comes pure SDV, where you define the entire vehicle around SDV.
Right.
So we are at that point. I think more and more OEMs and tier ones are realizing the importance of SDV for a variety of factors. Starting with how important software is becoming as a differentiator, and also in terms of the costs that it generates. But we are also now beginning to see the influence of a player that we probably never paid attention to, and that's the silicon manufacturers. Right. So the semiconductor manufacturers, or as we call the SOC suppliers, have a certain influence on that entire ecosystem, which the OEMs, tier ones, and companies like ours are beginning to understand it in slightly more broader detail.
Right. So the role of these SOC suppliers, like Satish just mentioned, it's going to be more important in the future. That's what you also believe, Sai. And also, talk to me about, during COVID as well, we've seen this entire disruption in this supply chain, when there was a chip shortage. So now what has the industry learned? And, now when they go towards this SDV architecture, so what are the key pointers that they are really being very pragmatic about when they want to do future product development towards these EVs and SDVs in the future?
Great. Thanks for that question. So since you referred to the COVID time, let me go back to that. One of the biggest challenges the OEs were facing was the chip shortage.
Right.
And they realized that when they looked for an alternate chip, it was not just a plug and play.
Right.
They had to redo the entire software again and again. And this is when the importance of the emergence of middleware came into existence, where we said, hey, let's get the Lego block that differentiates your app software from the hardware. And this Lego block should be something where when you change the hardware tomorrow, the app doesn't change significantly. And that was the emergence of true middleware that came in, which Autocar had solved the problem many decades ago. But we saw the usage of that coming in because of the need of having to migrate across different SOC suppliers or different derivatives.
Right.
But now, having said that, in the microcontroller world, it's far more easier. You're running real-time applications. But when you talk about the cockpit world, the ADAS world, where you're talking about processors now, the SOC seems to get a little bit more complex. So the middleware is not just an abstraction layer, it's a layer that needs to connect a complex hardware with its little software that it already has to a far complex application that drives infotainment, cockpit, user experience, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So that space is now getting more and more complex. Come Linux, come Android. Now, how do you create platforms that has a certain Lego construct or a platform construct which you can use successfully across multiple SOCs is not an easy problem to solve at this stage.
Right.
And this is where we believe the SOC suppliers today are trying to integrate that. This is what we call as vertical integration. They're trying to bring a significant amount of that middleware into their PSP layer.
Right.
As a part of the SOC, so that tomorrow the focus lies on creating that apps and so on.
So you
and
just
so forth.
focus on the software, and you're making it easier for companies to go to market faster, and the development times are shortening, and that's the future roadmap.
But having said that, there's two ways to it. Now, when you're entirely dependent on someone, there's a certain amount of lock-in that comes.
Right.
Now, two edges of the sword. Now, this is something where the ecosystem needs to come together and create maybe a kind of a structure, even in the processor world, and say that, they need to have leverage room to work or even decide the peripherals they want to work with and not be entirely determined by one player in the ecosystem.
Right. Sai talked about, this functional safety, and Autocar is there for quite a long time. And now with with the trend towards electrification and these changing E&E architectures, cyber security is also becoming extremely important. So if you could give us an overview about, how do you see this space evolving going forward in terms of, the security of your E&E architectures itself?
So one of my favorite quotes is cybersecurity is inversely proportional to the number of interfaces you will have open to the internet.
Right.
Yeah? And that's the only way forward. And with electrification, the relevance of software is that much more higher. So you basically do everything with software.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity, therefore, becomes very critical, not just to prevent an attack. So, for example, we have offerings of our own via a subsidiary of ours called Plaxity TX. We do intrusion detection, we do penetration detection. So that's a continuous check, like your, let's say, malware software or a antivirus on laptop. That is something that you have to continuously do. And that's where continuous investments have to happen from the vehicle manufacturers.
Right.
However, the place where it all starts, what we call secure by design. So when you're designing now your software platform, and with software platform, I don't mean software on a hardware, your entire vehicle platform on a digital basis, you have to start thinking about security then.
Okay.
So you have to identify what interfaces am I going to allow to be updated over the air. If I'm going to do that, what kinds of checks do I need to do? So checks can be again of two types. One is, of course, on your server, from where you're going to push the software, and the other is what we call edge. That means on the vehicle.
Right.
So at the edge of the vehicle, you're trying to check, is this now a software I should update or not? So it will only get increasingly relevant and complicated. I say this so I cannot quantify my emotion, but I hope that we don't learn it because of an attack, and that we already figure out that the consequences can be extremely dangerous in the event of a cybersecurity threat. We know from some of our experiments, also with players in India, EV manufacturers, two-wheeler and four-wheeler, the amount of hacking that you can do even with a Bluetooth phone is tremendous. Imagine if your intent was a lot more malignant. So this is something that we are continuously talking in the ecosystem to say we need to be secure by design, and you have to continuously keep testing whatever it is that you're going to fill up in your vehicle as software, and that needs to be done at least in two parts: one on your servers and one on the edge. It's a problem that I don't know if it's going to be resolved anytime soon, and the challenge is it's a moving target. So with every new update of either your SOC or the software, you have the possibility of a new cybersecurity threat. But that's something that you have to keep doing it on a regular basis.
Right.
So, and that's where our hypothesis comes: who pays for it? But then that remains open.
Right.
So from a technological perspective, there are possibilities to keep that in check, but you have to continuously upgrade your cybersecurity layer.
But are there also any regulatory challenges in this area of cybersecurity per se?
Yes. There are regulations today. There are clear definitions that are coming out, and it's about the cost of adoption and the relevance. Yeah, because the most dominant question being asked at OEs today, like Satish mentioned, is what is the cost of cybersecurity? How much time and effort should I actually spend in making it happen? Because let's say for a two-wheeler, anyway it will get carried away. So why am I investing heavily on cybersecurity there? I mean, it's a valid question. And so it's not so much about regulation, it's about that compelling reason eventually which needs to happen for adoption of cybersecurity. And it should not happen looking at only the vehicle level, because cybersecurity today is spoken about at a much bigger gamut. It talks about how you can protect your complete infrastructure, right from the time a simple ECU is manufactured at your location to the time it comes into your manufacturing line. A handshake happens securely, so thereof you're securing that product. So it needs to be from a larger scale of things.
And just to add, so there are certifications, there are ISO certifications. Certifications take you to a certain level, and then there are regulations. So the UNEC regulations are not yet mandatory in a lot of countries, including India. But there's still a gap between certification and regulations. And that's the gap that needs to be plugged. And like Sai rightly said, we should not make the mistake of looking at the vehicle standalone. You have the possibility for a cybersecurity hack even in your manufacturing and even before the software is going to be ported onto your vehicle. So you have to look at it as an ecosystem for which we know we don't have any regulations at this point in time. But this is one of those areas where certifications and regulations will help you at that one point. But then the regulations need to be continuously adapted to make sure that there is a certain value of in the
So whatever
model line
advancements keep happening in technology, so regulations also have to keep a pace.
So it's really a place where public and private needs to come together in the interest of the end consumer.
And I also want to touch upon a topic of, just to gauge your broader view on this shift in the E&E architectures. We've already today, if I talk about companies like Mahindra and Tata, they've showcased some of their really advanced EVs, including what we already saw with Mahindra especially, already going towards zonal architectures, domain-based controllers and all those things. So from your perspective, how do you see this mega shift coming to the vehicles actually in the Indian market in the future?
I think it's a given. It has to come. The basic parameters why it has to come is the number of ECUs, the wiring harnesses. And again, a hypothesis from our side is at some point in time, you'll start having part numbers for software, which is going to be a huge, it's going to be a new and a huge overhead for car manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers. And to get rid of these overheads, moving to the zonal architecture makes a lot of sense. Now, the challenge is the price point. So you'll already see Mahindra is a great example of how they're moving to zonal and domain architectures. The price point and how you design that architecture for that particular model line is going to be very interesting, because to make it profitable, you need to come up with again, I go back to a software platform. And for a software platform to be making money, you need to make sure that you reuse it as much as possible. And I think that's going to be the catch. And from an Indian ecosystem perspective, to what level of the vehicle are you going to bring it down? But it is inevitable. It will come. So in fact, we just saw for one of the tier ones in the stall here, already the ADAS and the cockpit issues being integrated. So we have our opinions on that, but it's already happening. So so less is more, or more, but
Sai, from a business perspective, what's the strategy for Elektrobit India going forward? We talked about this shift in the architectures and software becoming even more important in the coming times. So how do you see this as an opportunity for Elektrobit's business in India?
Great question. Thank you very much on that. So when you look at Elektrobit as a brand, it's always revolved around that secure, safe middleware software partner who can help me qualify a complex software stack to go into a vehicle and make it more secure and more safe. So we're going to be anchoring on all those elements. So if you look at some of the great work that we have done globally and locally as well, we have a depth of experience in the infotainment side. We work on complex chipsets. We realize working on these complex chipsets, we can bring complex operating systems, apps into reality at a price point that makes sense to a native tier 1 here in India. That makes sense to a local OEM here in India. How are we able to do that? We have a team of close to about 600 odd people based out of Bangalore. We're going to leverage the expertise which we have been giving globally to the local people here with local for local. And we see a lot of our customers are quite happy about that statement, saying because one of the biggest challenges about software is not about deploying it, but maintaining it over the life cycle side. It's not about just SOP, it's about end of life. And this is exactly how Elektrobit positions itself to be a partner of choice, to give you reliable, safe, secure software over the life cycle of a vehicle. In the area of infotainment, in the area of other domains in the form of middlewares. And if you know about us, we recently launched our Linux, which is safety certified, another breakthrough, because increasingly operating systems are going to be spoken about as we talk about the cockpit and the DAS coming together. operating systems are going to play a very important role, especially the Linux versions of it, and they have to be safety certified. Elektrobit is in a very strong position there through the products that we have.
Right. So like you mentioned at the beginning, that software is going to be one of the key differentiators between two products, because eventually, ultimately, fundamentally, now they're all moving towards the same, motor, battery, that sort of a concept.
Correct.
But the software experience is going to really define what that product, means for a company.
Absolutely.
Right.
If I may just quickly add to it, I take the words from Satish, where initially the understanding was everything your consumer touched and felt was the differentiating software, infotainment and so on.
Yeah.
Everything that is besides that is non-differentiating. But we realize the importance that the non-differentiating is now starting to take a differentiating flavor. Why? Because they started to become expensive, complex to manage.
True.
So what's my total cost of ownership going to be? And those are different important elements that makes the non-differentiating and differentiating software as well. Not for an external consumer, but for an internal stakeholder to ensure that the organization stays profitable and is able to manage a complex software.
Just lastly, Sai, could you quantify the kind of growth that you're targeting for the business over the next 5-year time frame till 2030?
To be honest, I would not be able to share any specific numbers, but we're looking at a double-digit growth. And that's what we have consistently done over the last 2 years, especially in India. And we will continue to promise that growth to our stakeholders. That's right.
On that note, thank you very much, gentlemen. Really
thank you so much.
Nice talking to you.
Likewise.
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.